A game can grab our attention for a plethora of different reasons. Sometimes it's a captivating story, other times it's an interesting game mechanic, but for me in Fox and Forests, it was hands down the gorgeous pixel art. To my delight, not only is it visually stunning, but the ability to change the season helps to keep level design fresh and interesting. However, a limited number of stages, and progression being gated behind revisiting stages for collectibles, puts a damper on things. Fox and Forests is a love letter to the classic 16-bit platformers, and that really shines through not only visually, but also how it plays. Taking control of a greedy fox, you cut a deal to help out the season tree, and are sent on your way to find 3 magical pieces of bark to restore his power. Luckily, the season tree bestows the magic melee crossbow upon the fox, as well as the ability to change the seasons. The crossbow fires different types of arrows to take out enemies, but also doubles as a melee weapon, as the name implies. A small blade attached to the end allows the fox to perform a few different moves, including a low ground sweep and an aerial attack for the harder to reach enemies. Eventually, new moves can be purchased to take advantage of the double jump in conjunction with an attack, giving you more ways to wreak havoc. More or less, combat and traversal feels pretty familiar to staples of the genre, not really breaking any new ground. But that's where the ability to change seasons comes in. With the press of a button, the entire environment shifts seasons, opening up new possibilities. By changing the season from spring to winter, bodies of water freeze over, unlocking a way to the other side not there a second ago. Or by changing spring to fall, large leaves fall and act as platforms. These are just a few ways they play with changing of the seasons, but I found them to be clever, especially when it came to boss fights. Each level is tied to 2 seasons, so you won't be able to freely change between any season, but only the 2 that the developers chose. I would have been interested to see how playing with multiple season changes would have worked, because more often than not, the mechanic would be used in a similar fashion throughout each stage. While it's almost always beneficial to change the season, it comes at the cost of your magic meter, so it's always important to be diligent with using it. Outside of changing seasons, Fox and Forests doesn't do much to set itself apart from other games in the genre, but does everything well. I found the level design to be interesting for the most part, especially considering how long each level is, but the unfortunate thing is that there's just not that many levels to begin with. Each season has 2 stages before boss battle, before moving on to the next area. There is a bonus stage per season, but requires you to collect all the seeds within the first 2 stages. This leads to replaying the level multiple times, especially since certain seeds are gated behind abilities you can only learn after completing future seasons. But that isn't the only thing gated behind finding seeds. You actually need a certain amount to move on to the next season, regardless if you had already beaten the boss and collected the piece of bark. Fortunately, replaying the level will always net you more money, which can be used to purchase upgrades to your health and magic meter, new abilities, and even potions for temporary boosts. I found it very satisfying to unlock new abilities, making once tough enemies to deal with a cinch. The challenge is tough even on the normal difficulty, but with a number of checkpoints along the way, ones which you'll need to fork over some coins to activate, you'll never have to backtrack too far. I opened this review commenting on how the visuals are what drew my attention, so obviously there's something I knew I'd enjoy. But I was continuously surprised at just how much attention to detail there was, and the wide array of colors used throughout. It was never more apparent than when switching between seasons, turning a beautiful spring day to a frozen tundra in the mere press of a button. On occasion, an enemy would get stuck on a non-existent plane during a season switch, and while certainly not excusing it, it almost added to the authentic retro feel. And speaking of those enemies, I really love their designs. The chiptune music isn't as memorable as the pixel art, but does help to cement the nostalgic feeling. The Fox and Forest developers set out to create something that both looks and feels right out of the 16-bit era, and it's safe to say they accomplished just that. Not only did they deliver a truly breathtaking rendition of the classic art style, but also introduced an interesting mechanic to the already familiar style of play. There were some choices I didn't love, mainly having to revisit levels numerous times to continue forward, and while it certainly doesn't reinvent the wheel, it does hit the sweet spot for those looking to go on a nostalgic trip.